Apache woman, your iron is touching me. Calm down. I'm a blacksmith in the hot, dusty town of Silver Creek. The sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden buildings and dirt streets. The town had grown slowly, built around a small river and a few trading posts, with the occasional wagon rattling along the main street. Life here was simple but hard. People worked from dawn to dusk, and every day seemed to blend into the next with the same chores and routines. At the edge of the town stood a small blacksmith shop, the only one for miles around. Its walls were made of dark, weathered wood, and the roof was covered in thick black soot from years of smoke rising from the forge inside. The smell of burning coal and hot metal lingered in the air, even when the fire was low. This shop was run by Eli Thompson, a man known across the county for his skill with iron and steel. Eli was a quiet man, tall and broad, with hands calloused from years of pounding metal. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, and his face carried the lines of a man who had lived through many hard winters. He had learned the blacksmith trade from his father, who had learned it from his father before him. For Eli, working in the forge was not just a job, it was a way of life. He enjoyed the rhythm of striking iron, the hiss of water when hot metal touched it, and the smell of burning coal. Each piece he crafted, whether it was a horseshoe, a plow blade, or a simple nail, was made with care and precision. That particular morning, Eli was bent over his anvil, hammering a piece of iron into the shape of a horseshoe. The sparks flew in every direction, bright against the dim interior of the shop. Outside, the town was waking up slowly. Children ran along the dusty streets, their laughter echoing off the buildings. Merchants opened their stores, calling out the day's goods to passers-by, while cowboys led their horses to the stable for the morning feed. The air smelled of dust, leather, and the faint tang of metal from Eli's shop. As he worked, Eli noticed movement at the edge of town. A figure was walking along the main street, moving with a quiet confidence that immediately caught his attention. The person was a woman, dressed in clothing that was both practical and unusual for Silver Creek. Her boots were sturdy, worn from miles of travel, and her clothes were made of soft leather, dyed in earthy tones. A belt held a small knife at her side, and her long, dark hair was braided neatly, swinging slightly with each step. She carried herself like someone who belonged to the land rather than the town, as if the mountains and forests had raised her rather than people. This was Ayanna, an Apache woman whose reputation as a warrior and hunter had spread far beyond her own people. She had traveled many miles to reach Silver Creek, not to cause trouble, but for a purpose that was simple yet important. She needed new equipment for her horse, things that had to be strong and reliable. She had heard stories of Eli Thompson, the blacksmith whose work could last a lifetime, and she decided to see if the stories were true. When she reached the blacksmith shop, she paused, taking a moment to observe Eli at work. The way he moved was precise and practiced. Every strike of the hammer was deliberate, every movement careful. She watched as he shaped the hot iron, the metal glowing red under the heat of the forge. Sparks flew, and she stepped back instinctively, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of caution. She had never been this close to a forge before, and the heat made her skin prickle. Eli looked up and noticed her standing in the doorway. "Good morning," he said, wiping sweat from his brow with a leather cloth. "Can I help you with something?" His voice was calm, friendly, and carried the tone of someone used to speaking with strangers, but not used to being ignored. Ayanna nodded, her eyes still on the anvil. "I've heard you make good ironwork," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it that made it clear she was used to being listened to. "I need some new tack for my horse, strong, reliable, and well-made." Eli nodded slowly, setting his hammer down. "You've come to the right place," he said. "I can make what you need. I'll need to know exactly what kind of equipment you want." He gestured to a bench where he kept various pieces of iron, leather straps, and tools. "Sit down, and we'll talk about it." Ayanna stepped inside the shop, her boots crunching on the dirt floor. The heat from the forge made the air heavy, and the smell of iron filled her nose. She moved carefully, not wanting to get too close to the glowing metal. As she examined the items on the bench, her hand brushed against a hot piece of iron that had just been left on the anvil. She recoiled instantly. "Your iron is touching me!" she exclaimed, jumping back a step. Eli chuckled softly, his deep voice echoing in the small shop.
"Calm down," he said, raising his hand slightly. "I'm a blacksmith."
"I know what I'm doing. That iron is hot, yes, but I can show you how to handle it safely if you like." Ayanna gave him a wary look, her eyes narrowing slightly. She was not used to people treating her like a child, and yet there was something about Eli's calmness that made her pause. She studied him carefully, noting the strength in his hands and the steadiness of his movements. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said, her voice steadying. "Show me." For the next hour, Eli demonstrated the different ways he worked with metal. He showed her how to hold the hammer, how to strike the anvil at the right angle, and how to cool the iron in water to harden it. Ayanna watched intently, fascinated by the process. She had always respected skill and strength, and Eli's hands-on mastery of metal impressed her deeply. She asked questions, sometimes interrupting him with curiosity, and he answered patiently, explaining each step in simple words. As the morning passed, a quiet understanding began to form between them. There was a mutual respect in the air, a recognition of each other's abilities and strength. Ayanna realized that Eli was more than just a blacksmith. He was someone who took pride in his work and cared deeply about what he created. Eli, in turn, saw that Ayanna was intelligent, curious, and not afraid to speak her mind. He found her presence intriguing, even as the heat from the forge made the small shop feel like an oven. Outside, the town continued its slow morning rhythm. Children played near the general store, and merchants arranged their goods for the day. The occasional horse whinnied, and the wind stirred up small clouds of dust that danced across the streets. Inside the blacksmith shop, however, the world seemed to narrow down to the forge, the iron, and the unexpected visitor who had walked into Eli's life. By the time the sun had risen higher in the sky, the first part of their story had been set. Sparks had flown, iron had been shaped, and a connection had begun between the blacksmith and the Apache woman. Neither of them knew what the future held, but both sensed that this encounter was the beginning of something important. In the small town of Silver Creek, under the watchful eye of the hot sun and the smell of burning metal, two very different people had crossed paths, and the story of their meeting would soon unfold in ways neither of them could have imagined. The next morning, Silver Creek awoke slowly, as it always did. The sun rose over the hills in a soft golden haze, illuminating the dusty streets and wooden buildings. The wind carried a faint smell of coal and metal from Eli's forge, which sat at the edge of town like a quiet guardian of skill and strength. Inside the shop, Eli was already at work, hammering and shaping iron with steady, practiced movements. The rhythmic sound of his hammer striking the anvil echoed through the room, a steady heartbeat that filled the quiet morning. Eli had barely begun when the familiar sound of footsteps outside the shop made him glance up. There, standing at the doorway, was Ayanna. Her presence was calm yet commanding, and her dark eyes seemed to take in everything at once. Today she carried a small bundle of leather straps and ropes, tied neatly and ready for inspection. Her horse waited patiently nearby, its nostrils flaring in the cool morning air. "Good morning," Eli said, smiling as he wiped sweat from his brow. "Back so soon?" Ayana's lips curved into a small, polite smile. "Good morning. Yes, I thought I would come and see what progress you've made," she said. Her voice was steady, calm, but carried a subtle curiosity that made Eli feel both challenged and welcomed. Eli nodded and gestured to the bench. "I've prepared some samples of iron for your tack. You can see and touch them to make sure they're strong enough for your needs." The sunlight streaming through the open doorway glinted off the polished iron, making the metal gleam in ways that were almost mesmerizing. Ayana stepped closer, examining each piece carefully. She ran her fingers over the smooth edges, testing the weight and flexing the metal slightly to see how much it could bend without breaking. She had handled many things in her life: bows, arrows, knives, and tools, but there was something about this iron that fascinated her. It felt alive in her hands, full of strength and promise. "Your iron is very strong," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I can feel its power." Eli chuckled, pleased by her attention. "It's tempered properly," he explained. "Hot, cooled, and hammered again. That's how it stays strong. Every piece I make has to last, especially if it's going to help someone travel far or protect themselves."
Ayana nodded, impressed by his dedication. "I see."
"You care about every detail," she said, her voice softening. "That is rare. Many craftsmen rush their work." Ellie shrugged, modestly. "Maybe," he said, "but I believe if you put your heart into it, the iron will hold. If it doesn't, then you've failed, not just as a blacksmith, but as someone who respects their craft." For a moment, they stood in silence, the only sound the occasional hiss from the forge and the distant clip-clop of hooves on the dusty streets outside. The air felt charged, as if the simple act of two people discussing iron could create sparks as real as those flying from the anvil. Then, without warning, Ayana's hand brushed the edge of a glowing piece of iron left too close to the fire. "Your iron is touching me," she exclaimed again, stepping back quickly. Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and alarm on her face. Eli raised his hands in mock surrender, trying to suppress a laugh. "Calm down." "I told you, I'm a blacksmith," he said. "The iron's hot, yes, but I'll show you how to handle it safely. It won't hurt you if you follow my instructions." Ayana's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained alert. "I am not used to handling things like this," she admitted. "Everything I have worked with before, wood, stone, leather, does not burn so fiercely. I must learn to respect the fire." Eli nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Fire is dangerous, yes, but it can also give life to what we create. It's all about respect and understanding. Come, I'll show you." He moved a piece of iron carefully to a cooler part of the anvil and picked up a small hammer.
"First, we strike gently," he instructed. "Feel the rhythm."
"Let the metal tell you when it is ready. Don't rush. If you rush, you will hurt yourself or ruin the iron." Ayana watched intently, then imitated his movements, striking the metal lightly at first, then with more confidence as she began to understand. The sound of the hammer on the iron was satisfying, a firm, ringing tone that echoed through the small shop. She felt a thrill of pride when she realized she could shape the iron, even just a little. "You're a fast learner," Eli said, his voice warm with encouragement. "Most people take longer to get the rhythm." Ayana smiled faintly, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. "I am used to learning quickly. The world is not always patient," she replied. Her words carried both humor and a hint of melancholy, as if she had faced many challenges in her life that required speed, strength, and cleverness. They continued working together for hours. Eli showed her how to heat the iron evenly, how to strike at just the right angle, and how to cool it properly in water to harden it. Ayanna asked questions constantly, curious about every detail, and Eli answered patiently. Their conversation ranged from practical techniques to stories of the land, horses, and survival. Slowly, a bond began to form, not just through the work, but through shared understanding and respect. At one point, a strong wind blew dust into the shop, and Ayanna instinctively shielded her eyes with her arm. A piece of iron tumbled slightly from the bench, and Eli caught it quickly before it could fall. "Careful," he said, smiling. "The forge is full of surprises, but that's part of the lesson. Always watch your surroundings. Always respect the metal." Ayanna nodded, breathing lightly. "Even small mistakes can be dangerous here." She paused, glancing around the shop. "But despite the danger, this place feels alive. I feel stronger just being here, learning from you." Eli felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He was used to people coming in for work and leaving without a word of gratitude, but here was someone who truly appreciated the craft.
"That's good to hear," he said. "It's not just the metal.
It's what we put into it. If we are careful, respectful, and patient, the work becomes part of us." The day passed quickly, and soon the sun hung high in the sky, casting bright light across the dusty streets outside. The forge became a place of quiet concentration and growing trust. Neither Eli nor Ayanna noticed the time slipping by, lost in the rhythm of hammer and iron. For the first time, both felt that the work was more than a job. It was a connection, a bridge between two very different worlds. As the afternoon approached, Ayanna stepped back to admire the pieces Eli had prepared. The iron gleamed in the sunlight, smooth and strong, ready to become the tack she needed for her horse. "It is perfect," she said quietly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "I can see why people speak so highly of you." Eli smiled, feeling a rare sense of pride.
Thank you. It means a lot coming from you.
"You understand strength, skill, and respect. That's more than most people do." For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet in the shop was comfortable, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of mutual respect. Outside, the town of Silver Creek continued its slow rhythm, unaware of the quiet drama unfolding at the edge of town. Two strangers, brought together by chance and necessity, had begun a story that would soon become something far greater than either could have imagined. As Ayanna prepared to leave, she turned to Ellie. "I will return tomorrow," she said. "There is more to learn, and I wish to see your craft completed. Perhaps I will learn even more than I thought possible." Eli nodded, a small smile on his face. "I'll be here. The forge waits, and so does the iron." We'll continue where we left off. Ayanna mounted her horse, the sun glinting off her braid and the leather straps of her gear. With a final nod, she rode down the dusty street, leaving Eli to his work and the quiet hum of the forge. But neither of them could shake the feeling that this meeting was more than a simple business transaction. It was the beginning of something significant, something that could change both of their lives in ways they could not yet see. And so the first sparks of friendship, and perhaps something more, had been struck, as real and powerful as the flames in Eli's forge. The following morning, the town of Silver Creek woke to a soft, golden light that spilled across the dusty streets and wooden rooftops. The wind was gentler than the day before, carrying with it the faint smell of sage and earth from the nearby hills. Inside his forge, Eli Thompson was already at work, hammering iron with the steady rhythm he had maintained for years. The sparks flew in brilliant arcs, catching the sunlight that streamed through the open doorway. His muscles moved with a practiced ease, each strike precise and deliberate. The quiet of the forge was broken by the sound of footsteps outside. This time, Ayana entered without hesitation, her boots clicking softly on the dirt floor. She carried herself with a confidence born of experience, but there was a curiosity in her eyes that shone brightly. In her hand she held a small leather pouch tied securely with a strip of soft hide. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and strong. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Eli looked up and smiled warmly. "Not at all," he replied. "I was just getting started. What's in the pouch?" Ayana placed it carefully on the bench and untied the leather strip. Inside were several small stones, each smooth and rounded, with a faint glimmer in the sunlight. "I thought you might like these," she said. "They are from my land."
They are strong, and I thought perhaps they could help us test the iron. Eli raised an eyebrow, intrigued.
Test the iron?
"Ow, so... Sometimes the strength of metal can only be measured against the strength of stone," she explained. "If the iron can withstand the weight and impact of these stones, it is strong enough for anything we need it for." Eli chuckled softly, admiring both the idea and the effort. "You are full of clever ideas." "I like that." The two of them spent the morning testing the iron. Ayana held the stones while Eli struck the metal, then switched roles, allowing her to try under his guidance. The sparks flew higher than before, and a small pile of blackened coal dust collected at the corner of the forge. Each strike made a ringing sound that echoed through the building and out into the town. As they worked, their conversation drifted from practical matters to stories of their lives. Ayana spoke of her childhood in the mountains, learning to ride horses almost before she could walk, and how she had trained herself to move silently through the forests, listening to every sound and reading the signs of nature. She described the animals she had tracked, the storms she had survived, and the lessons the land had taught her. Eli listened intently, fascinated by her stories. "You have lived a life full of challenges," he said quietly. "I cannot imagine what it must have been like." Ayana shrugged, a small smile on her lips. "Challenges make us stronger," she said simply. "They teach us patience, respect, and courage. You seem to understand that yourself. You work with fire, shaping something hard and unyielding into something useful."
That takes patience and care.
Eli felt a warmth in his chest at her words.
He had spent so many years focused on his craft, rarely stopping to share it with anyone who truly understood. Ayana's presence brought a new energy to the forge, something he had never experienced before. After a few hours, they paused to rest. Eli brought out a small pitcher of water and 2 cups. They drank slowly, the quiet comfort of the forge surrounding them. Outside, the town hummed with life, the merchants calling out their goods, children playing near the general store, and the occasional horse whinnying in the distance. But inside the forge, there was a sense of calm, a moment where the world outside seemed to fade away. Ayana set her cup down and looked at Eli. "I have never met anyone like you," she said thoughtfully. "Most people in towns like this are busy with their own concerns. They would not take the time to teach someone as you do." Eli smiled, brushing sweat from his forehead. "Perhaps, but I believe that knowledge is something to be shared. If you learn from me, and I learn from you, we both become stronger. That is the way of life, isn't it?" Ayana nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Yes, that is true." As the afternoon wore on, they returned to the forge. Eli showed her how to create hooks and clasps for the horse tack, demonstrating the delicate balance between strength and flexibility. Ayana was a quick learner, her hands steady and precise. Sparks flew as she hammered iron under Eli's guidance, the glow from the forge reflecting in her dark eyes. Each piece of metal they worked on became a symbol of their growing partnership, a bridge between two very different lives. At one point, a small piece of iron rolled off the bench and clattered to the floor. Ayana reached to pick it up, but hesitated, her hand hovering over the metal. "I do not want to make a mistake," she said softly. Eli chuckled. "Mistakes happen," he said gently. "Even the best blacksmiths make them. What matters is that you learn from them. You cannot fear the metal. You must respect it and trust yourself." She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. With careful hands, she picked up the iron and returned to her work. Each strike of the hammer became more confident, more deliberate. By the end of the day, the pieces of tack they had worked on together were not only functional but beautiful, each one a testament to their combined skill and effort. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Eli and Ayana cleaned up the forge. The air was thick with the smell of coal and hot metal, but there was also a sense of satisfaction that neither could deny. "You have taught me much today," Ayana said, her voice quiet but full of gratitude. "Not just about iron, but about patience and care." "I will remember this," Eli smiled, feeling a rare sense of fulfillment. "And you have taught me as well," he said. "Your ideas, your curiosity, your respect for what we do here. It has been a lesson for me, too." They stood in the forge for a moment, the quiet hum of the town outside contrasting with the heat and energy that still lingered inside. There was a shared understanding between them, a bond that had begun to form in the fire and smoke of the forge. It was a partnership built on respect, trust, and the simple joy of creating something together. Finally, Ayana gathered her things and mounted her horse. "I will return tomorrow," she said, her dark eyes meeting Eli's. "There is more to learn, and I wish to continue our work." Eli nodded. "I'll be here. The forge waits, and so does the iron." As she rode down the dusty street, Eli watched her go, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. He did not know what the future held, but he sensed that this was only the beginning of something important. The spark that had started between them in the forge was growing, and neither of them could ignore it. The town of Silver Creek continued its evening routine, unaware of the quiet drama that had unfolded at the edge of town. Two strangers, brought together by chance and necessity, had begun a journey that would test their skills, their courage, and their understanding of each other. In the forge, amidst the sparks and the heat, a connection had been made, one that would shape not only the work they created, but the lives they led. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Eli sat by the forge, reflecting on the day's events. He realized that the presence of Ayana had changed something inside him. The forge no longer felt like just a place of work. It had become a place of learning, of sharing, and of possibility. He wondered what tomorrow would bring, what new lessons they would discover, and what challenges they might face together. Meanwhile, Ayana rode toward the hills, the wind in her hair and a sense of purpose in her heart. She thought of the forge, of the iron, and of the quiet blacksmith who had taught her so much in such a short time. She felt a growing respect for him, a recognition of his skill and dedication. More than that, she felt the excitement of learning, of growing stronger, and of building something lasting, not just from iron, but from the bond that was forming between them. And so, as night settled over Silver Creek, the story continued. The forge would burn again tomorrow, sparks flying into the air as Eli and Ayana worked side by side. Each hammer strike, each careful bend of iron was a step forward in a journey that neither of them fully understood yet, but both felt deeply. In the quiet of the evening, the town slept, but in the forge the fire still burned, carrying with it the promise of friendship, respect, and the beginning of an adventure that would last far beyond a single day. The next morning, Silver Creek was unusually quiet. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting long shadows across the dusty streets and wooden buildings. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, and the wind stirred little clouds of dust along the empty main road. Something felt different in the air, though most townsfolk went about their morning routines without noticing it. Eli Thompson was already at the forge, hammer in hand, shaping iron as he had done for years. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal filled the small shop, a sound both comforting and powerful. He had grown accustomed to the predictability of his life, where every day involved work, sweat, and focus. But today there was an edge to the air, an unease he couldn't ignore. Ayana arrived shortly after sunrise, her horse's hooves clicking softly against the dirt. She carried herself with her usual calm, but there was tension in her shoulders that Eli noticed immediately. She had seen danger before and could sense it in ways others could not. "Good morning," she said quietly as she stepped into the forge. "Something feels off today." Eli paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I've felt it too," he admitted. "It's like the town itself is holding its breath." Ayana nodded and tied her horse outside the forge. She approached the bench, where the iron pieces from the previous days lay neatly arranged. "We should finish the horse tack quickly today," she suggested.
"If something is coming, we need to be ready," Eli agreed. "Let's work fast, but carefully."
Strength matters more than speed in this situation. The morning passed with intense focus. Sparks flew from the forge as Eli and Ayana hammered, shaped, and tempered iron together. Each piece of tack they completed was sturdy, flexible, and reliable. As they worked, their conversation was minimal, filled with short instructions, quick nods, and shared glances. The tension outside the forge seemed to seep into the room, making every movement sharper, every strike more deliberate. By midday, they had finished the main pieces of horse tack. Ayana tested the straps and buckles, pulling and flexing the leather and iron. Everything held firm. "These are strong enough for any journey," she said, satisfied. Eli nodded. "Good. But strength alone won't keep the town safe if trouble comes." Ayana looked at him with a questioning expression. "Trouble? What do you mean?" Before Eli could answer, a loud commotion rose from the main street. Voices shouted, horses neighed in panic, and the sound of running feet echoed through the town. Eli and Ayana exchanged a quick glance, both realizing immediately that danger had arrived. They rushed outside, stepping into the bright sunlight. Down the street, a group of bandits was approaching, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. They were armed with clubs, ropes, and a few pistols, their faces hidden under wide-brimmed hats. The townsfolk had gathered in panic, unsure of what to do. Some tried to hide behind barrels and carts, while others stood frozen in fear. Eli's mind raced. "We can't let them reach the center of town," he said. "We need to block the street and protect the people." Ayana's eyes narrowed, her hands resting on her knife belt. "Then let's do it," she said. "We have the forge.
We can use what we've made to defend the town. Together." They sprang into action.
Eli grabbed heavy iron rods and chains from the forge, using them to barricade the street as best he could. Ayana ran between buildings, helping the townsfolk find safe hiding spots and organizing them to move quickly if needed. The bandits rode closer, their shouts growing louder, and the sound of their hooves pounding against the dirt sent a shiver through the crowd. One of the bandits spotted Eli at the barricade and rode forward to confront him. Eli held his ground, swinging a heavy iron rod to knock the man's rope away. Sparks flew as the metal struck, and the bandit stumbled, giving Eli the chance to push him back toward the edge of town. Ayanna, meanwhile, had climbed onto a nearby cart, her knife ready. With precise movements, she disarmed another bandit who tried to steal supplies from the general store. The townsfolk, inspired by their bravery, began to help. They lifted carts, rolled barrels, and used whatever they could find to create obstacles in the bandits' path. It was not perfect, but it slowed the attackers enough for Eli and Ayanna to gain the upper hand. Eli noticed a group of bandits trying to sneak around the side of the street. "Ayanna!" he shouted. "They're coming from the east side." Ayanna nodded and ran toward them, moving with the speed and agility of someone who had spent her life tracking prey and moving silently through forests. She met the bandits head-on, using her knife skillfully to keep them at bay while Eli reinforced the barricade behind her. The fight was tense, with dust and sweat mixing in the air. Every movement had to be precise, every strike calculated. The bandits were strong and numerous, but they had not anticipated the unity and resourcefulness of the townsfolk, led by the blacksmith and the Apache woman. Slowly, the attackers began to retreat, realizing that taking Silver Creek would not be as easy as they had thought. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only a matter of tense minutes, the bandits turned their horses and rode away, leaving the town in relative safety. The townsfolk emerged from their hiding places, cheering and clapping for Eli and Ayanna. Their combined efforts had saved Silver Creek from what could have been a disastrous attack. Eli lowered the iron rod he had been holding, his chest heaving from exertion. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, scanning the crowd. Ayanna nodded, wiping dust from her face. "Yes, thanks to everyone working together."
The town is safe for now. The townsfolk gathered around them, expressing gratitude and admiration.
"You two are heroes," one of the merchants exclaimed. "We owe you everything." Eli shook his head modestly. "We just did what we could," he said. "The real credit goes to everyone who helped. Strength comes from working together." Ayanna smiled faintly, her eyes meeting Eli's. "Yes," she said quietly, "together we are stronger than any threat." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets of Silver Creek, Eli and Ayanna returned to the forge. The day had been exhausting, and the heat from the battle still lingered in their muscles, but there was a sense of accomplishment that could not be denied. They worked quietly, repairing and reinforcing the horse tack and other equipment that might be needed for future challenges. Eli looked at Ayanna. "You were incredible today," he said sincerely. "Without you, the town might not have stood a chance." Ayanna shook her head.
"We both did it. You gave strength to the town, and I helped guide it."
That is all that mattered. The two of them worked in silence for a while, the forge glowing softly in the twilight. There was a new understanding between them, a deeper bond forged not just from shared work but from shared danger. They had faced a real threat together, and in doing so they had discovered the power of trust, courage, and cooperation. As night fell, Ayanna mounted her horse, preparing to leave for the evening. "Tomorrow we continue," she said. "There is still much to learn, and the town may face more challenges. We must be ready." Eli nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. "I'll be here," he said. "The forge will burn, and the iron will be ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." And so the day ended in Silver Creek, not just with relief at surviving the attack, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Eli and Ayanna had proven that even in a small, quiet town, courage, skill, and cooperation could overcome great danger. The bond between the blacksmith and the Apache woman had grown stronger, and both knew that their journey together was far from over. In the calm of the night, the forge glowed faintly, a symbol of resilience and hope. Outside, the stars shone over Silver Creek, and the town slept peacefully, unaware of the quiet heroes who had kept them safe. But Eli and Ayanna, in the heat of the forge and the dust of the streets, knew that the work they had begun and the friendship they had formed would continue to shape not only their lives, but the fate of the town itself. The morning after the bandit attack, Silver Creek stirred with an unusual energy. The townsfolk were moving about with renewed confidence, their steps lighter than before, and their eyes brighter. The events of the previous day had shaken them, but they had also shown them that unity and courage could overcome even the most frightening challenges. Eli Thompson was already at his forge, as usual, the rhythmic sound of hammer on iron echoing through the small building. But today, there was a difference. He worked with a steady focus, yes, but also with a quiet pride. The events of yesterday had proven something important, not only about the strength of metal and craft, but about the strength of people when they worked together. Ayanna arrived shortly after sunrise, riding her horse with her usual calm and measured confidence. She carried a small bundle of leather and iron tools, as well as a small satchel with provisions she had brought from the hills. The sun gleamed off her braid and the polished metal of her equipment. Eli looked up as she entered the forge, and for a moment they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes: gratitude, respect, and an unspoken understanding of what they had been through together. "Good morning," Ayanna said, tying her horse outside. "The town seems stronger today." Eli nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yes.
Yesterday showed us what people can do when they work together.
I think the town will remember this day for a long time." Ayanna set her bundle on the bench and began unpacking it. "We should prepare for anything," she said. "Even though the bandits ran away, there may be others. The work we do now can help keep the town safe in the future." Eli agreed. "Let's reinforce the tack and tools, make them stronger, more reliable. We can also prepare some iron barriers and hooks for the streets, just in case." They worked side by side in the forge, the heat from the fire and the glowing iron surrounding them in a comforting glow. Their movements were synchronized, a rhythm they had developed over the past days, each hammer strike and bend of metal building not just the tools of protection, but the bond between them. As they worked, Ayanna told stories of the mountains and forests where she had grown up, speaking of the animals she had tracked and the lessons she had learned from nature. Eli shared his own stories as well, of traveling blacksmiths he had met, of small towns he had visited, and the lessons he had learned in the forge. The stories created a quiet camaraderie, a bridge between two very different lives. Hours passed quickly. The horse tack and tools were reinforced, and additional barriers were crafted. Each item was inspected carefully, tested for strength and durability. Sparks flew as iron met hammer, filling the forge with both light and heat. By midday, their work was complete, and everything was ready for the future. Ayanna stepped back, examining their efforts. "This will keep the town safe," she said. "For now, at least." Ah. "And it will give the townsfolk confidence in themselves." Ailey nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction he had rarely experienced. "But more than that, it shows what people can do when they work together. That is stronger than any iron." The two of them stepped outside for a moment, stretching their tired muscles and breathing in the warm air. The streets of Silver Creek were alive with activity. Merchants called out their goods, children played in the dust, and townsfolk moved about confidently, aware that their town was safer than it had been yesterday. As they walked through the main street, the townsfolk greeted them warmly. "Thank you for yesterday," one woman called. "You saved us all." Ayanna smiled, her eyes softening. "We all helped each other," she said. "No one could have done it alone." Eli added, "Remember, strength is not just in weapons or iron. It is in courage, trust, and cooperation. That is what keeps a town safe." The day passed peacefully, a welcome change after the chaos of the attack. But as evening approached, Eli and Ayanna knew they could not simply return to routine. There was one last thing to do, a personal gesture that would mark their time together, the respect they had earned for one another, and the bond they had forged in fire and challenge. Eli returned to the forge and pulled out a piece of high-quality iron. He worked carefully, hammering and shaping it into a small blade, a tool that was both practical and beautiful. The metal shone in the firelight, smooth and perfectly tempered. He etched small patterns into the surface, inspired by the stories Ayanna had told him of her homeland. Each stroke was deliberate, a reflection of the respect and admiration he had come to feel for her. Meanwhile, Ayanna had gathered some small stones from the hills outside town. She polished them carefully, shaping them into simple ornaments. Each stone had meaning, representing courage, strength, and survival. She planned to present them to Eli as a gift, a token of the bond they had formed over the past days. As the sun set, casting long shadows over Silver Creek, the two of them met in the center of the town. Eli presented the small blade to Ayanna. "I made this for you," he said, "not as a weapon, but as a reminder of the fire we faced together and the strength we shared." Ayanna accepted it carefully, running her fingers over the etched patterns. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you. I will carry it with me, always remembering the forge, the town, and the lessons we have shared." Then she handed Eli the polished stones she had prepared. "These are for you," she said. "They come from the land I call home. May they remind you that courage and strength are not only in iron, but in the world around us, and in the people we trust." Eli smiled, touched by the gesture. "I will treasure them," he said, "and I will remember you, Ayanna."
You have taught me more than you know. The townsfolk watched quietly, sensing the significance of the exchange.
There was a mutual respect, a bond of trust and understanding between the blacksmith and the Apache woman that went beyond words. It was a silent testament to the courage, cooperation, and friendship that had saved Silver Creek from disaster. As night fell, the town of Silver Creek was calm and peaceful. Lanterns glowed softly in the windows of the buildings, and the stars twinkled brightly above the hills. Eli and Ayanna stood at the edge of the town, looking out at the horizon. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply shared the quiet satisfaction of a challenge met and a bond formed. Finally, Ayanna broke the silence. "I must continue my journey soon," she said. "But I will return, I think. There is more to learn, more to see, and I feel that our paths are not finished yet." Eli nodded. "I will be here. The forge will burn, the iron will wait, and the town will always remember what we have done together. You are welcome whenever you return." Ayanna smiled, mounting her horse. She looked back one last time at Eli, then at the glowing forge behind him, and finally rode off toward the hills. Her figure grew smaller with each step, but the presence she left behind remained strong, a memory of courage, skill, and friendship. Eli returned to his forge, the familiar sounds of hammer and anvil once again surrounding him. But now there was a deeper meaning to each strike of the hammer, a sense that the forge was more than a place of work. It was a place of learning, growth, and connection. He worked late into the night, thinking of Ayanna, the bond they had formed, and the lessons they had shared. The town of Silver Creek slept peacefully, its people safe and confident, unaware of the quiet heroes who had protected them. Eli and Ayanna had shown them that courage and cooperation could overcome danger, that strength came not only from iron and weapons, but from trust, respect, and shared effort. As the stars shone above, Ellie placed the polished stones Ayanna had given him on a shelf in the forge, next to the small blade he had crafted for her. They were symbols of friendship, courage, and the enduring connection between two very different people who had faced challenges together. And so, the story of Eli the blacksmith and Ayanna the Apache woman reached its quiet conclusion, not with fireworks or grand celebrations, but with respect, trust, and the promise of future adventures. The forge would continue to burn, the town would continue to thrive, and the bond between the blacksmith and the Apache woman would remain, a reminder that courage, skill, and friendship could be forged in fire and tested in the streets of Silver Creek. In the end, the sparks that had flown in the forge were more than just iron meeting hammer. They were sparks of trust, respect, and hope. And those sparks, once ignited, would never fade.